Hey everybody, happy Easter. My name is Scotty Scruggs. I'm the pastor here at Northshore, and whether you're joining us online or in person, I am so glad you're celebrating Easter with us, especially if this is your first time with us, or if it's your first time back on campus, welcome back. Some of you know that old story about a florist who received 2 orders for flowers on the same day. The first was for a relocation of a business. The second was for a funeral service in a place kind of like this. Well, somehow the orders got switched, and the flowers for the funeral were sent to the business, and the ones for the business were sent to the funeral, which wasn't a big deal until the business owner read the card which said, "Rest in peace." And if you think that's unfortunate, the flowers that were sent to the funeral said, "Good luck in your new location." Which brings me to the reason I'm here, in a graveyard. Now, I know it might seem a little strange or surprising on Easter Sunday, or maybe you were invited by a friend and you were feeling really positive about the experience until right now. But you know, the very first Easter happened in a place like this. That's right, the most celebrated moment in human history, the reason that billions of people around the world are gathering today to sing and dance and celebrate is because of what God did in a place like this, where tears are shed, where pain is the norm, where hope seems hard to find. By the way, has anyone else shed any tears over the past year? I was talking to a family of 2 working parents who have 3 kids in elementary school, and they spent the past year working at home and schooling at home and being stuck at home. They actually had to add a second internet service provider because they had 5 people on Zoom. Netflix was streaming on every TV. They spent hours shopping online, but they didn't really buy anything because they couldn't go anywhere. So they just kept rearranging their rooms while they watched old videos of trips they had taken. And after almost a year of this, they told me, "We're done. Like, we've got nothing left in the tank. We don't just need to get away, we need to get away from each other." And those of you who are watching with your family right now, you can just whisper amen quietly to yourself, because you know what I'm talking about. The struggle has been real. The discouragement has been real. The longing for a new start has been real. And that's why I'm here. Because Easter is God's response to struggle and suffering. Easter is God's response to discouragement and fear. Easter is God's response to the obstacles that we can't overcome, all the way to places like this. So for the next few moments, I want to tell you the story of something that Jesus did in a place like this, and then I want to give you a chance to decide what that means for your life today. The story is about a man in the Bible named Lazarus. Now, we don't know much about him as a person. We don't know if he was more introverted or extroverted. We don't know if he was taller or shorter. We don't know if he preferred bagels or donuts, although, let's be honest, it's donuts, no contest. What we know is that Lazarus lived in a village outside of Jerusalem called Bethany with his 2 sisters, Mary and Martha. More importantly, we know that Lazarus was one of Jesus' closest friends. In fact, they were such good friends that when Jesus would travel to Jerusalem, he would often stay with Lazarus and Mary and Martha. But then, Lazarus got sick. So sick that Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus about it. They said, "Lord, your dear friend is very sick." But when Jesus heard about it, he said, "Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive glory from this." Now notice, before anything happens, Jesus tells us how the story is going to end. It's like that person who, before they watch a movie or a Netflix series, gets online and reads about the ending before they watch it. Does anyone else know one of those people? Some of you are sitting next to one of those people right now. Sometimes Nina and I will be watching something and she'll say, "I accidentally read about what happened. Do you want to know?" And I'll say, "No, I don't want to know." "And what do you mean you accidentally read about it? How do you accidentally find out what happened in this show?" But for Nina, It's a way to have the assurance that in the end, everything is going to be okay. Well, when Jesus hears about Lazarus, he tells his disciples how the story is going to end. This sickness will not end in death. Now, that doesn't mean that Lazarus isn't going to die. It just means that death is not going to be the end of his story. And by the way, for those of you who follow Jesus, he knows how your story is going to end too. And that doesn't mean that you won't experience some really difficult circumstances in your life, like that tragedy, that abuse, that depression, that challenge in your family. But according to Jesus, those things aren't going to have the last word on your life. He is. And we're about to see why that's such good news. But of course, Mary and Martha, they don't know this yet. And then to make matters worse, look at what Jesus does next in the story. The text says, so although Jesus loved Martha and Mary and Lazarus, he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. Not just a few hours, but 2 full days. And the text doesn't say he was in a meeting or helping someone in need. He just doesn't show up. Not on the first day, not on the second day. And then Lazarus dies. Still no Jesus. And they wrap him in grave clothes and bury him in a tomb. Still no Jesus. In fact, we're told that Lazarus has been dead 4 days before Jesus finally shows up. And that's important because in that day, people believed that when a person died, their soul would remain with their body for 3 days, but on the 4th day, the soul would depart, meaning game over, end of story. Or as the great theologian Bugs Bunny would say, that's all, folks. So 4 days after Lazarus dies, Jesus finally shows up. And Mary and Martha didn't come out and say, at last you're here, finally we're saved. You know what they said? You're too late, Jesus. In fact, Martha's exact words were, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. In other words, Jesus, you could have done something about this, but you didn't. And by the way, has anyone else ever felt that way? Has anyone else ever said, God, where were you? Or why didn't you do something? Or why aren't you listening? I sure have. So what's going on here? Well, the theological answer is that God's plan doesn't always follow our timeline. God's plan doesn't always follow our timeline. Sometimes it looks like he's late or he's absent. But remember, Jesus knows how the story is going to end. So he doesn't see himself as late. He knows he is right on time. Because God's plan doesn't always follow our timeline. But there's something even deeper going on here. You see, the point of the story is not just that Jesus knows how it ends, it's that he loves us in the middle. You see, when God seems late, we tend to assume that he just doesn't care, right? That he's too busy or he's too far away. But remember, back at the beginning of the story, the text said that Jesus loved them. Even though he waited 2 more days, he loved them. And then when Jesus goes to Lazarus' tomb, he breaks down and he weeps. And get this, the people watching him say, see how much he loved him. See, even though Jesus is the Son of God, even though he has the power to raise the dead, when he sees our pain and our suffering, he feels it. His heart breaks. Why? Because he loves us, even in the middle of the mess. You know, at night when I put our daughter Nora to bed, I always tell her, Daddy doesn't love you this much, or even this much. Daddy loves you this much. Well, a few weeks ago, I went up to her room and she was sitting there with an orange marker in her hand. Now, I don't know how she got that orange marker because we keep the markers locked away, like in a safe, in the garage, up on a shelf, under a blanket, covered with shards of glass, because you can't leave a 3-year-old alone with a marker. That's like parenting 101. Well, somehow, Nora found an orange marker and she used it to practice her penmanship all over the carpet. And I looked at the floor, and I looked back at her, and she knew she was in trouble because she looked at me with those precious little eyes and said, Daddy, I love you this much. Friends, that's how God loves us. Even when it's hard, even when life is messy, even when we don't deserve it, Jesus doesn't just know the end, he loves us in the middle, and he loves us this much. And so when Martha came out to see Jesus, Jesus didn't rebuke her, he loved her. And he told her, your brother is going to live again. And she says, yes, I know, in the resurrection on the last day. And Jesus said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. And then he looked her in the eyes and he said, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. And everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never die. And then he said, do you believe this, Martha? And if you want, you can just take out Martha's name and insert your own. Do you believe this? Do you believe this? Do you believe that Jesus is the resurrection and the life? Do you believe that Jesus has the power to heal and forgive and redeem and restore? Do you believe that Jesus can get you through that divorce? Do you believe that Jesus can free you from that addiction? Do you believe that Jesus can heal you from that hurt? Do you believe that Jesus is stronger than your sin? Do you believe that Jesus is greater even than the grave? Because I hate to break it to you, but someday we're all going to end up in a place like this. I read about a woman who's 102 years old, and someone asked her, what's the best part of being 102? And she said, no peer pressure. You see, the question isn't, am I going to face death? Because clearly the answer is yes. Last time I checked, the mortality rate for human beings was hovering right around 100%. The real question is, do I believe that Jesus defeated death? Because how you answer that question changes how your story is going to end. But before you answer that question, Jesus has one more thing he has to do. He goes up to the tomb, and he told them to roll away the stone, and the response is, no way. And I love how the old King James Version puts it. It says, by this time, he stinketh. In other words, it's bad. There's going to be a smell. And by the way, when we let God into the sin and mess in our lives, it's going to stink. There's going to be hard conversations, uncomfortable moments, embarrassing revelations, painful emotions. But guess what? Jesus can handle it. So Jesus told them to roll away the stone, and then he prayed, and then look at what happens. Jesus shouted, Lazarus, come out. And if you want, you can take out Lazarus' name and insert your own, because Jesus is calling you out of that grave, out of that sin, out of that shame, out of that spiritual darkness, whatever it may be, you can come out. And then the text says, and the dead man came out, his hands and feet bound in grave clothes, his face wrapped in a headcloth. And Jesus told them, unwrap him and let him go. You see, Jesus doesn't just want to bring you back to life. He wants to set you free from whatever is holding you down. Right now, some of you are wrapped up in an addiction. Some of you are tied down by depression. Some of you are trapped in that sense of guilt. Some of you are carrying the weight of shame or regret or hurt, and Jesus can free you from that. But you can't do this on your own. Just like Lazarus was totally powerless to call himself out of that grave, so are you, and so am I. Which is why Jesus came into the world. It's why he went to a cross. It's why he gave up his life. And you know what? When he died, they wrapped him in grave clothes and buried him in a tomb. And God didn't show up. Not on the first day, and not on the second day. But then on that third day, Jesus rose. And on that first Easter morning, a group of women came to the grave to grieve, but the stone had been rolled away, and the tomb was empty, and a messenger from God appeared and gave the very first Easter sermon in a place a lot like this. He said, why are you looking for the living among the dead? He is not here. He is risen. And here's the best part. That story can be your story. some of you may remember that movie, The Sixth Sense. It's about a boy who sees dead people, and Bruce Willis plays a psychologist who tries to help him. And the movie ends with this huge plot twist. I don't want to ruin it for you, but Bruce Willis is one of the dead people. Sorry, I guess I'm now one of those people too, right? But there's this moment in the movie when the boy talks about seeing the ghosts, and he says, I see dead people walking around like regular people. They only see what they want to see. They don't even know that they're dead. You see, it's possible for you to be spiritually dead and not even know it. For you to see only what you want to see. For you to believe, hey, I'm doing okay, but inside your soul remains lost in sin and in spiritual darkness. And that's why this can be such a scary place, because left to ourselves, there's no way around it until Easter, until Jesus rose from the grave. And because of that, you can receive a new life and a fresh start and a hope that not even death can stop. Because everyone who believes in Jesus will never really die. This place is just a stepping stone to a new location where you'll never taste death, you'll never know pain, your body will be renewed, your heart will be restored, and your soul will be healed. But you have to believe. You have to say, Jesus, I trust you, I believe in you, I surrender my life to you. And some of you have never made that decision. So I want to give you a chance to do that right now. It's a simple prayer. You can just say to God right now in your heart, God, thank you for loving me and for sending Jesus into the world. I believe he died for my sins and that he rose from the grave. And so now I surrender my life to you. And friends, if that's your prayer today, I am so happy for you, because now you know that in the end, everything will be okay. And for those of you who already know Jesus, I believe God has more freedom and purpose and joy for you. Maybe you've been walking with God for a long time, but you're still tied up in your fears or your anger or your insecurity. Well, you can ask Jesus right now to untie you and free you from whatever's holding you back. And you know, while we aren't told what Lazarus did next, I'm pretty sure every day mattered to him. I mean, how could it not after this? And God wants you to live with the same kind of freedom and purpose and joy. Every day counts. And if you want to know more about that in your life, I hope you'll reach out and let us help you find what God might have in store for you. And then there's one more step that some of you need to take. See, for the past 2,000 years, whenever someone said yes to Jesus, they would be baptized. Because baptism is just a symbolic way to say, I get a fresh start, I get a second chance, I'm coming out of that grave and receiving new life from Jesus. And to help you see the power of this, we asked a few individuals here in our church to share about their decision to be baptized. So take a look at this.
Hi, I'm Yamei Wu.
My name is Kayla.
My name is Benny. I was born in Kenya, Nairobi, and I grew up somewhere in a very enclosed village called Kiambu. And later I came to Miami.
I grew up in China, so I came from a small town called Suzhou, and I go through college and then eventually get an opportunity to come over here in US.
My family wasn't religious, but I had a best friend growing up that was, and I was always curious, and she would invite me every so often, and so I would go on and off on like Christmas and Easter.
Life Miami was not cool as I expected. It was really a discourage for me, and I went up and down looking for friends, looking for people to love me.
I first heard about Jesus when I came here in 2009. I was very skeptical about the story, to be honest. And for a really, really long time, I just found it's really hard to believe.
I guess life before going to church was the way I can put it is isolating.
I felt so lonely in Miami. I didn't have friends, I didn't have family.
I just feel like very lonely and very helpless.
I feel like the anxiety in my life looked very chaotic. I just felt like I was the only one dealing with it and I had to figure it out myself.
And then I decided that now it's time for me to go to church.
And at that point, I met a friend from church.
We had a family friend who knew Jonathan Wolfgang, and we came one Sunday, and then we stuck ever since.
And I decided to move here from square zero with nothing.
I heard about Alpha through people from the church, like, hey, you want to know more about the Bible? And a lot of people are kind of on the similar shoe that you.
And then going to church, it kind of opened up my eyes to like, hey, I don't have to do this alone. There's a huge community out there. And then meeting Jesus, I also noticed that like, I actually have someone to walk through this crazy life with.
After dumping out all the emotion garbage and emotion burden, I was ready for a new start. Baptism offered a new start.
I don't know, it just clicked and I was like, hey, I'm gonna finally do it, like no more excuses, and this is like the next big phase in my journey.
I came here and not knowing anybody. I didn't have friends, and I remember when I filled up that form to get baptized, they asked me if I have a family around or friends who want to share the celebration, but I didn't have anybody. And I came here, me and just my roommate. I remember when I got baptized that day, it was the most special moment for me. Because after I got baptized, they all clapped for me. I felt like God is welcoming me back. There was a family waiting for me.
Wasn't that incredible? And friends, that story can be your story because God is ready to welcome you back. And there's a family right here waiting for you that loves you. And so, if you haven't been baptized, whether you've been following Jesus for a long time or you just made that decision today, I want to give you right now a chance to take that step. Now, some of you are thinking, but this is a church. There must be a meeting to attend or a class to take. No, actually, you just took the class. Some of you may be thinking, but my faith, it's kind of a private thing, just between me and God. Well, imagine if when I asked Nina to marry me, I said, I want to be committed to you, but let's just keep it kind of a private thing. You know, letting other people know we're married, that's just kind of embarrassing. Any guesses on how that would have turned out? Yeah, not very well. Because there's something really important about going public and saying, I don't care what other people say or think. Because this is about Jesus saying, come out of that grave, come out of that spiritual darkness, come out of that sin, and receive the freedom and joy I have for you. So, I want everyone watching right now to get out your phone. I see some of you are still just staring at me. I know you know what a phone is. If you have one, get it out right now. And then open the Message app. And in just a moment, I'm going to invite anyone who wants to be baptized to text us right now. Just text the word MyFaith to 97000. We have online hosts who are ready to follow up with you. And by the way, if you're not sure or you have more questions about this whole Jesus thing, just text us. We would love to have a conversation with you about whatever's going on in your life. But friends, this could be your moment. Even if you're still in your pajamas, even if you're surrounded by family and it's noisy and chaotic, Jesus is calling you out of that grave and he can set you free. So, when I count to 3, anyone who wants to be baptized can text MyFaith to 97000. Are you ready? This is your moment. Are you ready? Okay, on 3. 1, 2, 3.